All right, Jim, we're live.
Well, Jim, and I really do appreciate all of you showing tonight. It's a great honor for you to be here for me. I've got a couple of announcements that I'd like to make before we start. We've changed the name of the meetings to the New Tracks Meetups. We think that really describes better what Dylan and I are trying to accomplish here. What we want this to become, if we can possibly get it there, and we think we're getting it there, is this is the place where the best modelers in the world meet to exchange their techniques. We want to make this the channel for mentoring. That's what I've been writing about for the last 3 years, and that's what I'm hoping that we can create in this Zoom program site. So we hope you agree with us. I hope that you can support us, and we really appreciate you being here this evening. I've talked to a company in Germany. Bad on names, but I'll try to spell it for you. It's Zerwald, Zeifwald, software company. I had a modeler contact me and say that he didn't want to learn how to build scenery. He wanted to learn how to computerize his model railroad. And with my ability with the computer, that wasn't going very far. So he gave me the name of this company. And I called the owner and talked to him for a little bit. And I talked to a modeler in Australia that uses his software that has an extensive model railroad. So I'm writing an article, and I've invited them to be on our Zoom meeting on September the 5th. And this will be something really different for us because they're going to talk about computerizing your model railroad and the advantages in doing it, how to do it, what is software accomplished for you, and then you'll be able to talk to the guy from Australia who's actually done it and be able to tell you his experience in installing it and actually operating it. So I hope that you'll be interested in it, and I hope you'll put that on your calendar.
Jim, I've seen that in operation. The Wakefield Heritage, the Model Railroad Club in Union, New Hampshire, has that system in on the club layout. And Chris, I forgot his last name offhand, has that on his personal layout. And it is highly recommended if you're a techie to get it going. It's over my head, but operationally, it's absolutely incredible. You can just set up your whole operation and sit back and watch trains run, and single main line, and no trains will multiple trains will go, and you'll never have a head on. Everything is signalized, and they'll put one off into a siding while the other one goes by. It's absolutely incredible what they can do.
That's what I'm told, and it's something that you got to really see to believe. But anyway, I think it's really going to be an interesting topic for us because I don't know about everybody else, but I'm just not hearing that talked about. I'm not seeing it in the model press much. I'm not seeing people talk about this. Is the first modeler who's really, sounded like he was really interested in it and wanted to start the discussion. So I thought it would be interesting for us, and I hope you all can attend. Listen, I'm looking for U.S. companies or clubs or individuals who have implemented the system. So if you could send me in an email who to contact or the club name or the individual who has that and is operating it, I'd really like to talk to them and see if I can include them in this article. Because I know nothing about this. This is just something brand new to me. And my email you can send it to me at is Jim Kello at oscaleresource.com.
I'll send you that info.
Thank you. Next thing I want to mention to you, and Dylan, if you could put this the email that I sent you up on the share thing.
Yep.
The March 26th, 28th, 2021 O-Scale meet in Chicago. This is an extremely important meet as far as I can tell and as far as I believe. The Chicago meet way back when is the first one that I went to that I ever entered a contest. So and I won first place for my model. So this really has a long history with me, and I'd really like to see it succeed. but I think that if you can read what Dylan has put up, and if you're interested at all in going to this show, the earlier that you can register, the earlier that you can make this hotel reservation, the better off it's going to be for the success of this show next year. And this is a new group that's putting it on. The group that's done it historically has stopped doing it. So this is a new group putting it on, and they really need our support. So if you're thinking of going, now's the time to register. Now's the time to talk it up, because this could be the end of the O-scale meet if this one doesn't really come off well. Excuse me. Dan Doherty is still having his meet this September. It's an O-scale and S-scale meet, and you can read about that in both of his magazines, S-scale resource and O-scale resource. Let me see. I want to tell you about what Dylan and I are doing here. We're fortunate that we have two consultants now that are helping us. Phil Edholst and James Knapp. James is the one that came up with our new flyer design, which I think is just outstanding. And Phil is the one that came up with our new name that I think is outstanding. So we're relying on them to try to help us with our marketing and try to get the word out the best way we can to try to make sure that people really understand what we're doing and what we're all about, and can join in the discussions. One of the things that we're happy about is that the company that was here a couple of times ago, Wi-Fi, that talked about their new control system, sent out a video of our Dylan, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I know. I don't know where it's coming from. I've got multiple mics lit up. Trying to mute mics, but it's not letting me mute mics.
Everyone just mute their own mic.
Just have everybody mute their own mics.
Yeah. Usually lets me do that automatically. But...
Yeah, as soon as you went to
Ow.
I think I'm frozen.
No, there's something. I think there's something up with Al. Okay. No, I can see Jim. I don't know. Move your face.
I don't know. I can see you.
Okay,
That's
there we
all
go. I see you now.
okay.
Can you see me, Aaron?
Yeah, I can see you all right. There's something wrong on Al's end. It's showing his video just died.
Al's end. It's showing.
That's where the echo's coming from. Apologies for the technical glitch, everyone. I'm not quite sure what's happening.
If you're using a phone and computer for two devices.
Al's on his desktop, and something's going on. And it won't let me mute. It's not letting me mute anyone.
Dylan, you're still screen share.
No, I'm not. How's Al still locked in the screen share?
How's Al still?
Hold on, there's something. I don't know what's going on here. This is
Sign
new.
out.
Well, that's new. This is a new problem.
This is a new problem.
Well, I can't say we've run into this before. I can't.
Well, let's don't worry about it. Why don't I just keep talking for a little bit, and then we'll try to get through this. All right?
All right. Al looks like his video just came back.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Okay. I don't know what happened, and Al just muted again.
Okay, here I go. Where was I? Okay, Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi sent out the video of his presentation when he was on our show. All I'm seeing is you, Dylan. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
We're all still online.
Okay. And I really do appreciate him doing that. We got 100 hits off the video as soon as he sent it out to his customers.
Well, nearly
So-
100, but near enough to not make a difference. It's so far the biggest video on the YouTube page.
So anyway, if you all could consider sending out our videos or sending out the notices that we put out to your buddies and other club members maybe that you're connected with to try to help us get this knowledgeable and get the information out there. We really think that we're presenting some really excellent modelers and have some great programs. And we're doing everything we can think of to try to make this a fun time and something that you consider coming back to and not wasting your time at. So with that said, if you can help us at all, we'd appreciate it. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dylan a little bit and let him talk about a show that's kind of close to our hearts because I've written about On30 recently. In fact, it was just in the O Scale Resource magazine. And it's no chance that that's the reason Al is here tonight, because when that magazine came out, of course, Al was prominently talked about in the article, and I wanted him to certainly be here this evening. But Dylan, if you can talk about the show and so forth that Al puts on a little bit, I appreciate it.
All right. So I am not one of the long-time guys to Al's shows. The first one I went to was his last show in Lycoming, Montersville, which went pretty well for me for a nobody, because that's what I was at the time. I was went pretty well. This year marks the third year that I've been going to Harrisburg, and I also want to basically put my hat in the ring and try and help push it, because if anything, we want the show to go off as well as we can expect this year. Now, we don't know what's going to happen. But we're not giving up without a fight. I'm not giving up without a fight either, because this show has done well for me, and Al has been an amazing host, to say the least. Him and Kevin do a great job putting it on, so if we can help promote that show in any way we can, we're going to do that. So to that effect, we're going to be talking with some of the people who have been to the show. Vendors, some of the people who have just visited the show, just to get a feel for, why do you go to it? I go to it because I enjoy it. I know that's my goal, my perspective on it, but that's just me. I'm just one guy. Might as well let the people who have gone there and had success at Al's show speak for themselves. So that's something we're hoping to do sometime in August. I don't know what sort of format it's going to take just yet, just because we're still, going through the logistics of it. But, it's well enough along where we know we're going to do it, and we'd rather say it now. So basically, if you've ever been to Harrisburg, we're basically putting together a Harrisburg special. I guess that's really all I can say about it. Just because, that's...
The reason that I wanted to take some time and really talk about Al's show some, I looked at Al's show as a mentoring opportunity. It's not just a place to go and buy and sell stuff. It's a place where you can go and you can talk to your buddies, yes, but you can also talk to the people that are providing you the product that you're buying. And you sit down and you can ask them how to build it. You can get their advice on what to do. You can talk about the problems that you're having with your modeling and get their comments back and forth to you. And that to me is a mentoring show. And to the extent that I understand, that's the kind of thing that Al provides at his show. And I think that's wonderful, and it fits in exactly with what my articles are all about and what I'm trying to get the Zoom situation about. So with that said, that's why I talked to Dylan, and he and I are behind this 100%, because it fits in so well with what I believe the true needs in the hobby are, and that's people sharing their skills and sharing their techniques and helping each other become better modelers. And with that said,
before we even get into that, Jim Mack just started screen sharing. I think he's trying to get his thing working. Give me a sec. Let me see. Oh, there we go. All right. I think he's just trying to get his mic and everything working.
Okay.
Hey, Jim, this is Kevin Spady. I have a question for you, which is related to publicizing this particular set of meetings. I'm the editor of our PSR dispatch, and I'm also involved in our division, NMRA division newsletter. Can you, do you want promotion within those kind of contexts of this particular meeting?
Absolutely, Kevin. Absolutely. Let's
Okay.
face it, the NMRA, in my opinion, offers one of the greatest educational, if not the greatest educational program for model railroaders around, and that's the Achievement Program. So
Yeah.
if the NMRA model builders, this is exactly the kind of program I think they should be interested in, because we're having MMRs, we're having non-MMRs. I don't care what initials they have behind their thing, as long as they have the skill and talent to bring to the table that other modelers can benefit from to become better model builders. And so, yes, I would love for you to promote that for us and to help us in any way you possibly can.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do.
Great. Thank you so much for your help. So, Al Judy. Somebody asked me today, well, how long have you known Al Judy? Well, I got to say, I met Al Judy through his post on the internet and his modeling. And then people started mentioning Al Judy this and Al Judy that. And then I saw him on a Zoom a couple of times that we host here. And then I started emailing him back and forth. And then I wrote him and said, I'd like to profile you in my article on On30, and he agreed to that and gave me some great photos and great write-up about himself and about his modeling and his philosophy. And that article just came out. It was 33 pages out of the 100 and something pages of the O-Scale magazine. And I've gotten some good comments and about it, and I'm happy about that. And now I've even started getting people from New Zealand that are On30 modelers writing and saying, gee whiz, we'd like you to do more about On30. So I may do a second one. I don't have the people yet enough to know whether I can do that or not. So if you're an On30 modeler and you like this article and you'd like to see me do another one, let me know that you're interested. So with that said, I'd like to turn this over to Al and listen to really an outstanding modeler tell how he creates his scenes and show us some of his modeling. Al, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for your kind words as well. Hello to everybody this evening. Jim had asked me to discuss my modeling philosophy, scene creation, and detailing this evening. So I figured that's a pretty broad topic. So the best way to do it was I'll tell you a little bit about myself and about my philosophies, and you can ask questions at any time, and we'll just see where it goes. We'll take it in the direction that you folks want to go with it. So about me, for those of you that don't know me, I got my first train set of marks in 1962. 1964, I got my first scale set, which was an HO set. By 1970, I was painting, decaling, weathering equipment. And in 1970, weathering equipment was almost unheard of. There was nothing on the market. Pretty much, I went to my junior high school art teacher and said, how can I do this? And he got me started with pigments and chalks and things like that. And I've been developing those skills for 50 years. In 1982, I opened a hobby shop in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, strictly trains. We were there for 10 years. The recession of 91, the advent of internet shopping and so forth was sort of the end of the brick and mortar store for me. But we specialized in nothing but trains, a lot of brass, high-end stuff. For the next 20 years, I just kind of modeled casually on my own, kept to myself. And then in the early 2000s, I come across the On30 and fell in love with it almost immediately. So I dumped 40 years worth of HO equipment, about $30,000 worth of brass locomotives, and switched over to On30 and haven't looked back. Love the scale. Just having a ball with it. More fun than I ever had in the hobby. In 2012, I started getting back into the public modeling and joined up with some of the internet groups, but quickly found that they were not very focused, kind of all over the place, just not my thing. So I decided to start my own On30 page. And it took off quickly, grew like crazy. We started in about 2014. We now have 4,500 members. It's the biggest On30 group on the internet. Because it grew so fast and was so successful, I had a lot of the other modeling groups contact me and ask me if I would admin or manage their groups for them. So as of today, I manage about a dozen groups online, about 30,000 members. I try to post to as many as I can every day to keep the activity level up. So my personal posts get about 500 hits a day. Thousands a month, see whatever I post. I also saw the opportunity, we had talked about the Harrisburg show, when I started in 8 years ago in Montoursville, which is near northeast Pennsylvania, near Scranton. I started it to fill a gap in the model railroad or in the On30 modeling genre. There was a big show in Kimberton, Pennsylvania in May, and then there was nothing again until the New York show in October. So we talked it over and decided a summer show would be something to try. And we started out with a 2-day show. Friday was an On30 show all day. Saturday, we opened it up to all scales just to get more people in and make it better for the vendors. So that worked real well, grew every year. And last year I moved to Harrisburg. So I also moved the show down here, and we decided it was time to make it more focused. So we went to strictly O-scale narrow gauge. And we threw it together in about 3 months, had a fantastic turnout. A lot of the vendors, well, with the exception of 3 or 4 of the vendors, everybody signed up again for this year before they left the show. So I assume they were happy with what they sold. We had clinics for both days, all day, some good home style cooking, just a nice event. And like Jim said, it's really not a train show. It's more of an event. We get together. It's a social learning event. It's really unlike any other show you've ever been to on this scale. So now we're to the point where if we can pull it off this year with the COVID, we were planning on it being just huge. But we're going to lose all of our European and probably most of our Canadian vendors and guests this year. But we figured even a smaller, watered-down version is better than nothing at all. So unless something changes, we've moved the date from June to September, and we're still on. So we'll see what happens. Before I start talking about interesting modeling, I just want to share a couple of tips, things that I find very useful. I build professionally, build layouts for customers, weather locomotives, scratch build buildings for museums, from old photographs, whatever. The only thing I don't do is electronics. So just a couple things that I found helpful for me over the years I thought I'd share. If possible, I recommend having a dedicated workspace where you have all your stuff together in one place, and if you start a project, you don't have to put everything away to go back to it the next evening after work. Keep your workspace clean. I see pictures of that just give me nightmares of workbenches. I just found that when I'm done with a project, I clean everything up. I put my supplies away, the paint back on the shelf, the tools away, and wipe my bench down before I start over. I just find that a neat bench seems to make for neat work, and you get your work done a lot faster if you're not working around 3 other projects that are sitting in your way. Keep your stuff organized so you don't have to spend as much time hunting for supplies as you do building. Work areas, I have 3 work areas. I have a general workbench where I do cutting and sanding and painting and sawing and things like that. I have what I call a clean workbench. Actually, you can probably see it behind me. And that one's there just for decaling, maybe light engine repair, couplers, things like that. Anything that's not going to make a mess, because if you're going to decal or anything like that there, you don't want to be doing weathering there or sanding or anything like that. And then thirdly, I have another bench that is for drawing plans up and layout plans, buildings. I've designed buildings for some of the laser cutting companies. And it's actually, I actually use it dual purpose. I build it out of white melamine, so that if I need a place to shoot photos of models, I can set them in there. It has a K4000 full spectrum fluorescent light above it. And it's a great space just to shoot studio shots of models that I've built. So it serves 2 purposes. So back to what Jim had asked me to talk about. And feel free to ask questions anytime, gentlemen. The term I like to use for modeling is continuity. The definition of continuity is a state or quality of being continuous. I believe that the rule of continuity is useful throughout the modeling process. Uniformity from building your bench work through the final detailing of your scenes. Bench work uniformity in design, in materials, in your wiring, using the same technique throughout, the same colored wire. Keep your work neat. It all pays off in the end. Track design. You decide what you want from your layout before you start. Operations, continuous running. You're building it just for photography and to show off your models. These are all things that will, down the road, if you need to add to the layout, service the layout, remove something from the layout, that you'll be grateful for. An example of servicing it. I do something that a lot of people don't do, and that's I do not glue down any of my scenery material. I found that the ballast and everything else, it's not a problem. First of all, you can keep it cleaner by being loose. You can just go over it with your ballast, for example. You can go over it with a soft brush and tap it. The dust goes down through it. It looks like it was just laid. You have to replace a switch, or you decide to move a piece of track to put a different building in. You can take a shop vac, suck the ballast up, clean the shop vac out first so that you can reuse the ballast. Move your track, replace your switch, whatever you need to do, and lay it right back down. And 45 minutes later, you don't know you ever touched the layout. If you've glued everything down, you're sawing it out. So it becomes a week-long project instead of an evening project. So anyhow, uniformity there. Now, for the fun stuff. Along with continuity, I like to discuss aesthetics. I'll give you an example of continuity and aesthetics. You go to a train show and you find a museum quality, beautiful building, beautifully detailed, that you just have to have. You spend a huge chunk of your money and you buy this building. So you bring it home, looks great, you give it a predominant spot on your layout in among all of your Plasticville buildings that you've had since you were a child. Okay. The building you bought still looks great, but the overall looks of your layout have become completely diminished, because people will walk in and they won't say what a beautiful layout. They'll say what a beautiful building, and won't, out of courtesy, won't comment about the rest of your layout. So what I always try to explain to people is choose a level of quality and detail that you wish to accomplish and try to stay within that range. And that can be, you know, some people want to do everything themselves, and that's fine if you do that throughout the layout. If you want a higher end, something that's above your level of ability, you can buy built buildings and weathered locomotives and so on and so forth. But if you want that overall bang of the layout, when someone walks in the room or when you take photos of it or something, you've got to try and keep the continuity throughout. Sorry, just looking over my notes here. I got ahead of myself. You want to do this with your detailing, your scenery, your structures, everything. If you start out, you want to use the same scenery materials throughout. Weathering. At one of the recent meetings that we had here, somebody said about everybody over-weathering their buildings. And this is true, that there are buildings that are falling down, buildings that are in average condition, buildings that were just built and painted yesterday. And in real life, that's true. But if you put a shiny building on your layout beside other weathered buildings, it stands out like a sore thumb. And this is where aesthetics come into play. Sometimes prototypical is not the best way to go. Personal preference has a lot to do with it as well. But you'll find that if you like it heavily weathered and you go with heavily weathered and maybe some average weathering, it'll look a lot better together than putting a shiny brand new building, even though it's prototypically correct, next to a barn that's falling down. To the eye, that shiny building just looks out of place. If you blend things for scenery, keep track of how you're blending it so that as you go on and you need to blend more ballast, you can get the same look throughout the layout. Detailing. You'll find that every building's not going to be surrounded by a ton of junk, but you're going to have something usually around every building. Towards the front of your layout, you want to put a lot more detail into it. The further back you go, the less detail. People look at it, they assume what you have at the front is carried throughout the layout, even though you haven't done that. A lot of people ask me, you know, to do videos and things like that to show them how to do weathering, scenery, so on and so forth. I'm lucky. I was born with some natural artistic ability, and I also have the ability to look at something and remember what it looked like when I go to build it. Sometimes I can see the scene before I even started. I know what it's going to look like when it's done before I've even started building it. I'll take things I've seen from maybe 3 or 4 different locations, and I can see them fitting into the scene. So for me, that's something I can tell you how I do it, but I can't give you that vision. A lot of that also comes from practice. Put it in, look at it for a couple of days. If it doesn't look good to you, it's not going to look right to anybody else either. Move it around, play with it. Even if you're building your layout, set the buildings on, see what they're going to look like, move them around a little bit, look at it from different angles, take some photographs is a great way to know what it's going to look like. Shoot it from eye level, from above, and play with it before you finalize anything. Just because you drew it on paper, don't think you have to stick to that plan, because I don't know that I've ever built a layout where it actually ended up being exactly like the plan. So don't be afraid to move it around. Don't be afraid to tear it out. If you put it in and you're not happy with it, pull it back out. Another advantage to leaving your scenery loose and not gluing things down. Maybe you'll get some more what's that? Okay, hold on. Sorry, my wife lost her phone and needs to call it on mine. But leaving your scenery loose, your buildings loose, you can pull it up, change it, change the buildings, move the buildings. There's don't ever be satisfied with it. And everybody goes to a show and finds stuff that, oh, I'd love to have this in my layout, but you don't have any room. So you leave yourself that opportunity. Back to staying consistent with the way you build it. It's easy to change things, pull things out, put things in. So,
Yeah.
yes.
I got a question for you. When you say everything is loose, I build On30 modular, so to me, everything literally is loose except for kind of the core scenery.
Right.
But it sounds to me like you're doing your ground cover and bushes and trees and all that is loose on your layout. Is that correct?
Right. On a module, it would be tough to do if you're moving it around, because if it gets tilted at all, things are going to move. But on my layout, the only thing I glue down is I put a coat of brown acrylic paint. I just go to the paint store and pick out the cheapest flat acrylic they have, and I mix it with liquid wallpaper paste. Brush it on with a 2-inch brush, and sprinkle on the basic Woodland Scenics Earth ground cover. That's the only thing I glue down. And I put it on smooth so that if I want to set a building or something on it, I can set it on top. The rest of it is all loose. The ballast, the trees, I just poke the foam, or I use an awl and poke through the plaster coating and just stick the trees in that they can be pulled out. The ballast is the big thing. Not gluing the ballast gives you, just makes it so much easier to move things around and to service things, because I'm sure you all know, the switch that's the hardest to get to is the one that always goes bad first. Any other questions? Okay, Dylan, if you want to give me that host, we'll go over a couple of photographs here and look at some detail and talk about some things, ask some questions.
Actually, you are set up where you could just hit the screen share button.
Just share. Okay. Let me know when it comes up.
It's up.
Okay. So here's an engine house that I built for a module. Move them over here so I'm looking at this camera while I'm talking to you. This was all scratch built.
Oh, we just lost it on the screen.
Oh, sorry. I'll put it back. Is it back?
It's back.
Okay. But if you can look at the unique detail to it here, it has a brick paper bottom. It's textured brick paper. All individual boards, fully framed on the inside. The tin at the top that's all rusted off is actually pressed paper from Stony Creek Models. And to get that rusted away look at the bottom, I just use a wire brush on a Dremel and burnish it right off. You just have to make sure that the the rotation of the wheel is towards the bottom of the paper and not the top, because it'll just roll it right up if you go the other way. But you can take that right off and get that worn look. And then, of course, I just weather it with rust powders. The canvas door drapes, as you can see, the doors were removed. I left the hinges there, but the canvas is just made out of painted tissue paper. So here's a view of the inside of it. We all still good? Still see it, Dylan?
Yep.
Yep, okay. So fully detailed on the inside. This was put on a module that I took to shows for 2 years. It was called End of the Line. The track ended there at this old broken down engine house. Here you can see a lot of junk in that around the back, broken glass, boards falling down. Here's this is a drain pipe from the water column. The water column behind this has a drain in the concrete base, and this is the pipe coming out of the ground into the stream. So down to that detail, it was covered. Some more of the broken windows and things like that. Here's looking down, there's the water column on the left-hand side. Underneath, we have ferns growing and all kinds of mixed foliage, so it looks natural. The big thing is, when you're doing things like this, don't think about it too much. Just stick it in wherever, like nature would. Wherever.
How'd you do your ferns?
The ferns are from Meg Ammo. They're cut paper, individual leaves. You have to glue them together.
Wow.
So you glue them to a little bunch. They're beautiful, but they're a lot of work. I've
been using dyed feathers for ferns, but these look better.
Oh yeah, these are gorgeous, but you have to, like I said, they're cut out of paper. When you pull them out, you have to be so careful that you don't pull the individual leaves off of them as you're taking them out. But the scenery, nature is random, so don't overthink it. You just put it in, make a hole wherever you feel like you want to make a hole. If it doesn't look right, just take it back out. The hole's the size of a pin. If you made too big of a hole, you put a piece of coarse turf over top of it, and it's gone. But you can see here, like on the bridge, even the little bolt heads are rusted and stuff on the little bridge going across the stream here. So the level of detail, this was a showpiece to take the shows. So I put a lot of extra detail into it, more so than I would on a layout that you were going to run every day. You can actually over detail to the point where it's tough to operate without moving things around or damaging what you're doing. Keep that in mind. Also, don't ever put anything tall where you have to reach across it to get to the trains or anything like that. Build small in the front to big in the back.
I got a question for
Sure.
you now.
Yep.
You said like you do your windows like broken glass and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Are you using like plastic or real glass?
I'm using 0.005 Plastruct clear sheeting.
Okay.
Yep.
I know some people use them, little slides and stuff.
Yep. I've done that. Works great, but it's hard to control how they break when you break.
Right. Yeah.
Where with this, I just take a brand new X-Acto blade and, cut it right out the way I want it to look. When I have used the slides, you kind of shatter them and you just pick pieces out.
Right.
Glue them in around the frame or something like that and hope it looks right, because like I say, when you break them, it's just a random break.
Right. Yeah. You can't control it how it breaks. Right.
Right. The building on the left there is a station with a switching tower that has crew quarters on the back of it. It's a model that I designed for Foggy Mountain models. And this is the one that they used for the cover of the packaging. But here you can see there's a bicycle standing alongside of a ladder hanging on the side, shovel leaning up against the coal bin over here. Just little everyday details that you would see, you know, in any old time photograph. You know, flip through the books. When you see something like that, make a note of it. So, you know, you remember to, something you can use. Here's random junk piled up between the tracks. Steel beams, pallets, barrels, an old generator, just miscellaneous stuff. A lot of this stuff is out of my junk box. Leftover parts, whatever. I just throw it into a box, and when I have a little bit of time and don't have a project on the bench, I'll pull stuff out, glue it together, and weather it up. Stick it in a bin or a box, so when I need something, I can just open it up and go through and cherry pick out the pieces that fit where I want to use them. So I probably have 5 bins full of finished detail stuff like this. It's either individual pieces or just gluing into little groupings that you can just set them around between the track, beside buildings. It's nice to be able to have some options when you put them out. You can say, it doesn't really look right, but it's what I have. But if you have 4 or 5 different things you can try, you're like, oh, I like that, you know. But once again, a camera is your friend when you're doing this. Put it down, take a couple pictures, look at it on your computer screen and say, oh yeah, I don't like this, or I don't like that, or that's perfect, I love it.
All right now.
Okay, here's the same scene, just a different view so you can see it a little better. I'm an On30 modeler, but that's a plow off of the AHM plow gondola. Remember those? They were a gondola with a concrete load in it, and they had the plow on the front. It was so oversized in HO that I can use it in On30. I just scratch build a different mount on it. Mainly freight car in the background, some empty barrels, things like that. You know, just random detail. Along the track, you'll notice there's some oversized stones and some chunks of wood. Here and there, I'll dump some coal out along the track, just randomly. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Just put it wherever. Here's a picture of the my ash pit at night. The ashes I make out of fine cinders mixed with gray powdered paint pigment. It's really nice and fine. And then I'll put in just a little bit of number 4 super dirt from New England brownstone, which gives it a little bit of, I guess they call them clinkers, the big chunks that they had to throw out that wouldn't go through the grates. So things, you know, so that gives it some texture in the ash piles. Once again, here's some cinder blocks sitting by the building, an empty pallet. Okay, this is a view just looking over a section of the layout where you can just see all kinds of detail that's been added throughout. Here's a close-up of that. Just things to make it interesting. I changed the fence up halfway through. So at the end of the one property, it changes to a different type of fence, which would be very common. Figures, you know, give them purpose. Don't just stick them in. I mean, I have a lady here sweeping, leaning on the broom. She was sweeping the porch when the brush salesman showed up. Grandma's sitting up here knitting at a table up on the porch. There's a lady hanging laundry over on this porch over here. So figures are great if they look like they belong. Here's a good one to see the detail along the track, the different textures in the ballast and the debris laying along the track. I did this one in black and white just because it makes the detail show up more. Same here. You can see in front of the engines, there's chunks of wood, a little bit of foliage coming up through down towards the end there, some stones, just junk that you find laying between the tracks. It's almost everywhere, especially if you're modeling back in the steam era. They didn't clean things up like they do now. This is before they invented safety. Just another view there. Wood piles with debris laying around them. Close to the track, right up to the track. Sand spilled along the track. Here's an outside dock at a workshop. Once again, an oil can sitting on top of the barrel, a gas can, guy going through a parts bin. Just things that you would see in an old photograph. Here's a old collapsed foundation, junk thrown inside of it. Another one of those small junk piles that I just glued together from stuff out of the box. Threw a couple of details like the cinder block and a Tichy barrel. Just a leftover piece of tin and a piece of chain. And I think that was the main thing there, I think, was the base of an HO crane. When you're making junk out of it, scale doesn't really matter too much. Here's a 40-foot long backdrop mill I built, and used a photograph for it, down to the point of the windows that are open in the photograph I left open in the model when I built it. If you look on the ground here, there's an old piece of tin from the roof, half a ladder leaning up against the wall. So just whatever. Another example of just mixed details. Hit and miss pump, gas cans.
Al?
Yes.
Question. One of the things I think you do really well is rust effects, and this is a perfect example of that. Can you describe a little bit what your process is?
Absolutely. It's very simple. The tank there was sprayed with primer gray. While the paint was wet, I sprinkled rust pigment onto the wet paint, left it dry, brushed off the excess, and then gave it a light coat of dull coat, which takes it from a rusty orange and turns it to this dark brown, older rust color. And it's literally as simple as sprinkling it on. I control where it goes. I'll use a card or something, or a lot of times I'll use a really small, soft brush so I can just go along and tap it off the brush around the edges. But it gives a beautiful effect, super easy to do, especially for like corrugated tin. I tape the stuff down on a sheet, 50 pieces at a time, spray it with a $2 can of gray primer, sprinkle the pigment over the top of it, let it dry, brush it off and dull coat it, and this is the results you get. So it works really well. These are the things you find when you've been doing this for 50 years. Somewhere along the line, I came across it accidentally and found it worked really well. The streaking in that on the bricks, once again, I am almost solely use paint pigments to weather with, which are the dried pigments that they use in industrial paints. You can get them from industrial paint companies. They sell them by the pound. The only thing you have to watch is they're so concentrated because they're made to be, you dump a pound of it into a 55-gallon drum of linseed oil to make barn paint. And so a lot of times you have to tone it down with white or gray or something like that so that it's not overpowering. The nice thing about it is when you dull coat it, it does tone it down. You lose a lot of it from the dull coat. So you can do it a lot heavier, and then the heavier you put the dull coat on, the lighter it makes it. So if you get an oops and you put too much on, you just give it an extra heavy coat of dull coat and it tones it right down. You can also go back over it afterwards with a little bit of, with a light dusting of black, which will tone it down as well. On the barrel, I don't know if you can see, can you see my cursor down here moving?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Down here on the barrel, you see the rust spots. There, what I do is I just take a small brush and I put paint a little spot with rust paint. I still have rust float wool because when they were going out of business, I bought cases of it. But I just touch it with that and then sprinkle the powder heavily over top of it, bump it off, let it dry, and when it's dry and you brush the excess off, you get a scaled rust, which I have an engine here that has a close-up of it coming up. I'll show you what it looks like when it's up close. It's a very textured rust. Here was just some reefers with the old, there's some of your rust, Kevin, on the mechanisms, the props and that. I even painted the inside of the insulation white on the inside of the doors on these. There's a closer up view of it. You can see, if you look at the, right here, you can see the scaling in the rust.
Yeah.
Here's just a couple of stock cars, you know, they're painted, they were painted oxide red, sprayed them with cheap white spray paint, 99-cent stuff. Dipped them in paint thinner after you painted them white. The paint thinner will take off the white, but not the red primer, the oxide red, Rust-Oleum, which is, you know, $4 a can. And then you just start brushing. And I left white here and there, wherever, you know, and it just makes it look real faded and worn like it's down to the wood. Added the rust streaking and stuff like that afterwards. Knocked a couple of boards out from the mad cow disease. And ends up with a pretty good look. Easy to do. Once again, I'm all about simple and quick. So you can come up with that finish in, you know, it's a 1-hour project to do a couple of cars like that. Here's that outdoor workshop. The different textures, more of the tin done, not rusted as heavy this time. Plaster over some of the stone. That's just, when I do that, I just use the DAP acrylic spackling, thin it down with a little bit of water, and just paint it right on. And even when it gets hard, it's real easy to shape and put detail in and scrape back off, and you get that semi-plastered look. This one, I think this one was actually molded on that way, but I do this on a lot of foundations. I'll go over the stone with this and then just put it here and there to give it that plaster facade look.
So what are you using for the initial stone?
Well, for foundations,
yeah.
I have a lot of cast stone foundations from New England brownstone. There's a company that makes, can't think of the brand. They make a rubberized stone retaining wall that's supposed to be for like a dock.
I think that's Chooch, isn't it?
Chooch, that's exactly what it is, Chooch.
Yeah.
Yep. That's nice because you can easily cut it to the height you need. Now it's pretty expensive. Two pieces that are, I think they're 2 inches high and 12 inches long is about $13.
Right.
But boy, they're beautiful. They're, you know, you can cut them down. I usually split them, and so I end up with like a 2-foot stone foundation, and then put a little bit of that acrylic spackling over the top. And like I said, because it's the acrylic, it doesn't get super hard. So it's real easy to take a dental pick or something like that and scrape some of it off and put cracks in it. I've even made concrete walls that way. Retaining walls, I just take that stuff, thin it down with a little bit of water, put it on with a putty knife, and smooth it up when it's dry with a little bit of sandpaper, real fine, like 400 grit sandpaper, and it makes a nice poured concrete wall.
No, there's a detail in this image that I really love, and I do on my modules as well, and that's the mud boards, the walking boards.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Not a lot of people do that, but it's like real life.
Yep. Yeah. Well, once again, if you look at the old photographs, these are the kind of details that you find that you really would never think of until you're like. So when I see something like that, a lot of times, even if I'm reading, I'll just take my phone and take a picture and load it into a file on my computer. And I have files that are like, landscaping ideas and building ideas and stuff like that. And I'll just go through and go, oh, that would work perfect here, So it's it's just a good resource. And you don't have to go back and go through 20 years of magazines going, I know I saw that picture somewhere.
Al, do you have favorite sources that you go to for those pictures, or just dumb luck? You just read a lot of stuff, or what?
Yep, I go through a lot of books. I look at a lot of stuff on the internet. I have I've been a logging modeler for years, so I have a lot of the logging books, and not necessarily narrow gauge, but backwoods and short line books and things like that. So like I said, when I see something that catches my eye like that, like, wow, I would have never thought of that. I'll like I said, the easiest way today, you don't have to, I used to do it with my scanner on my computer, but now you just take a picture with your phone and send it to the computer. So here we have, I have a 4 foot long stone arch trestle on my layout that I'm building right now. They were flawed, they were flawed 9-inch sections from a manufacturer, and he was at one of my shows, and he had a whole box full of them. And I said, well, how much are they if I buy the whole box? And he sold me the whole box for like $40. Well, some of them were so flawed I couldn't use them, but I ended up putting 6 or 7 of them together to make this 4 foot long stone trestle. And of course I have it just swampy, some little streams running underneath. You'll notice the cinder block in the stream that fell from the bridge above. Just a unique little detail. And it's funny because almost everybody that looks at my layout notices that cinder block in the stream. They just find it really, really cool that that's in there. So,
now, is it missing from the bridge?
no, not that. Well, it doesn't match the stone in the bridge, but I figure it fell off of a flat car,
Okay.
Here's just another stream. Once again, I did it in black and white so you can see all the texturing going up through with the rock overhangs and things like that. Just random, don't need to overthink it. You just kind of dump it in and let nature take its course. And most times you'll only have to move 1 or 2 that don't look right, and you'll have it exactly the way you want it.
How do you make your water, Al?
I've tried just about everything. Recently, I've been using the Woodland Scenics, their water kits. They're a lot simpler. They work well. I found that a lot of the craft store stuff that I used to use, I don't know what happened. They changed the formulas or something. I used it for years. It was clear they made it to dump into glass vases with artificial flowers to look like there was water in the vase. Back about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was cheap. I mean, way cheaper than these water kits. It started, when you'd pour it more than about 1/8 of an inch thick, it would crack. I don't know what they did to the formula, but you just couldn't use it. Every time I poured it, it would crack. So I had to switch over, and I tried and they all work well. I've tried the wetter water and those, but the Woodland Scenics is easily accessible. Everybody carries it. It's easy to mix. They even sell it pre-mixed if you don't want to stir for 6 minutes. So, and you don't get all the little bubbles from stirring for 6 minutes. So, like I said, I've used many of them. They all work just about the same, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Another pile of junk. This is just, once again, some HO stuff here. This is a crane boom. This was a gate on an HO cattle pen, you know, but they're really, you know, junk is sort of like trees. There's not really a lot of scale to it, you know. It can be a 3-foot gate or a 6-foot gate, right? So looks fine there. Actually, there's another one in that scene. That's a different one there. That's probably from the same kit. I think I bought it at a show for 50 cents in a baggie. But this is on a hillside. So the junk's sliding down over. Of course, we have the ground torn up where the pieces slid down. You know, just think about what it would look like when you see scenes like this. You know, you've all seen it. Just imagine what it would look like if that big heavy iron wheel slid down over the bank. There'd be no grass or anything. It would be bare ground. And so that's the way you model it. There's some of that stone from Chooch right there, wrapping around that building. Little retaining wall. Here's a dilapidated building to the point where when the floor collapsed, the old pot-bellied stove that was still inside went through the floor. Once again, an idea from an old photograph I saw. It was the foundation. It was a stone foundation, and laying inside was some rotten boards and an old pot-bellied stove. So I thought, oh, here's a good opportunity to use a pot-bellied stove.
Al?
Yes.
Alan here.
Alan, how are you, buddy?
Good. Many times when I've commented on your work, I use the term or the quote, the artist has the ability to see. Did you comment on that?
Well, yeah, I talked about it a little before. I don't think you were on yet. Like I said, you know, I can share my techniques, the materials I use, but it's hard for me to give you the ability to see the scene. I can look at it and know what it's going to look like before I build it. I know what the end result's going to be. And from modeling for years, I know what materials to use and that to get that look. But my best recommendation is, you know, look around when you're out. If you're in an old industrial area or something, look around, take pictures. When you're looking through books, just when you see something that you like, you know, reference that photograph someplace where you can find it so you can go back to it. So it's color reference, location, just like we talked about the iron wheel sliding down over the bank. If you took a picture of that junk pile, you know, you'd see that. And so for people that aren't blessed with a natural artistic ability, this is the best way I can tell you. That, and don't overthink anything. Make it random. You know, nobody thinks about it when they're throwing junk down over a bank. Where am I going to throw this? They just walk out the back door and give it a heave. You know, down the bank it goes. So it's like the stones by the stream. Just take them in your hand and dump them along the edge. More than likely, nature will make it look better than you can if you put them in one at a time. You know, so. Same with this. And like I talked about earlier, don't be afraid to move things around, put it there, look at it for a couple days, go back to it, take pictures of it. Pictures are such a good way to realize that, wow, that just really doesn't look right, you know? So, that, you know, that's my best advice on it, Alan, is, you know, play with it, play with different things, try different things, you know, don't be afraid to try it. If it doesn't look right, you can always change it. So.
Hey, Al, this is Kevin.
Kevin.
Funny story on a photograph. So I don't know if everybody knows Dirty 30, and 30. Those are the Ontario boys up there. And Bruce Leckie posted a picture of his layout. So I really admired it. It was really good work. But when I went to the show in Springfield, I said, hey, Bruce, I brought a picture of your layout. I said, hey, look right here. There's a spider web.
Yeah.
And Al is absolutely right. And so you could not see that spider web. And I said, he said, where? And I pulled him down and there was a spider web, but it popped right out of the photograph. I've learned to do the same. Every single thing I make, and I think the problem I face, and Al and I talk about this a lot, I'm a pretty talented guy. I'm a very smart guy. I'm an engineer. I really struggle being artistic. So
You're
where
using the
I
wrong
have,
side of your brain, buddy.
right, well, where I have a problem, and this is really important because you can use me as the guinea pig here, is I feel awkward screwing things up. I feel awkward making something messy. It's really a challenge for me. It's not a normal thing. Even I don't even comprehend it. So that I realize I have to work with. But I do take pictures, and I tell you, it's just so amazing. That might be one of the best tricks ever. Is take a picture of it, and go, oh my God, look at it. For some reason, the camera picks it up, but your eyes just are wandering left and right, up and down, and you don't see and go, what the hell am I thinking? And then you fix it, of course.
You can put a building on a layout and scenic all around it and stuff, and you'll look at it for months before you realize you have a gap underneath the bottom of the building and the ground that you didn't see. But if you take a picture ground cover, you're going to see that gap immediately, you know? And
Well, yeah, I agree. And, you know, it sort of goes back in how I got to know Jim here, who's doing these shows, because he really was this thing of a mentor. You're my mentor, of course, one of my key mentors. And I think that's really helpful in this too. You're going to have to screw some stuff up. You're going to have to find some things to practice on, things you don't give a damn. HO kits are probably your best bet. You know, I actually use a lot of HO stuff in my builds, just because one of the things that makes me mental are bricks. I just cannot put an O-scale brick on my layout because it's not O-scale. I refuse to. So everything starts as HO. But, you know, Al's giving me some tips. Buy a junk model at a train show for $1 or $2 and just play with it, you know, to work on your skills. And that's actually what I've done. I've learned sanding skills, gluing skills, shading skills. There's another guy by the name of Traxler. I don't know if you guys know him. He got me sort of turned on with my weathering style, which I like. It's sort of, I'm trying to force myself sort of to like a 1940s weathering style where I use artist oil paint. There's something about that I really like the method. You put a little artist oil paint in that odorless turpentine, and I use that. That tends to be what I feel comfortable with. And I don't know if Al mentioned this because I was late dealing with selling my house here, but Al has probably said this 100 times. There is more than one way to do something. You have to find a style, and you have to stick with what you feel comfortable with.
right,
I find certain things
do
I
what
feel
works for you.
comfortable with.
That's right.
You've got to do what works for you. So the other thing though is I have modeling objectives. So, you know, admittedly, you know, where I can do some things in real life, they're incredible. I've got like nearly 24 inventions credited to me, really complicated shit. But there's stuff in the modeling world that I suck at. And I have things on my list that are objectives that I've got to learn. So I force myself. So like I bought this week, it doesn't make people understand. Al knows a little bit, but I bought an airplane. I want a water scene, but there's pontoons on an airplane that I saw. I've got to learn how to make it look like it's aluminum when it's not, and dull aluminum, just not painting aluminum, but make it look like it. So I already set myself up with a modeler, a military modeler who did it, and he was going to teach me. So you've got to break it down into objectives. You got to try something. If you don't like one approach, try another. Ask for help. There's so many guys here that have been modeling for so damn long. They'll go, yeah, I tried that 3 or 4 times. It didn't work for me either. This is what I tried. So that's just from some, I would say I'm an above average modeler. Some things I'm pretty good at. Some things I suck at. So you have to be humble too. You're not going to be good at everything you do. And if you just don't get it,
That's the hardest part of modeling for Kevin.
Being humble.
well, yeah, no, but that's just my personality. But I know my limitations. Like Al, and I don't mind if guys are okay with me talking. I told Al I will never even attempt to learn how to weather an engine. I have no desire to learn. I've got too many other things I want to learn. I don't know where everybody else is with their modeling. I'm past the Bachman stage. I'm tired of Bachman. The Bachman stuff that I have will all be, you know, professionally done, or I'm into brass locomotives. I am not taking a $400, $500 brass locomotive and pretend that I know how to weather it. Because if I screw it up, you know, that's an expensive mistake. So that's one area that I've already tossed my hat in, that I have no interest of ever learning how to weather a locomotive. So just some of my thoughts, you know, just from a random guy who, you know, I sell so much, but I like to model as well.
Hey, let me get through these last couple of photos here. I got about a half dozen left, and then we'll take some questions and talk about some of this stuff. If you look at this one here, this is a very small scene, but there's a ton going on here. Oil leaks underneath the engine over here. If you look here, there's shovel marks in the coal on the floor where they shoveled the coal into the boiler. Stacks of bricks to keep the coal from sliding out of the bin. Just things like that. Little details that you learn from looking at photographs. So, you know, just look for those unique things. That's what really brings it all to life. Here's just
another thing you do, and you do it a lot, is your highlighting. You might comment on that as well. You know, how you highlight edges, and I noticed.
Yeah, sure. I dry brush almost everything just to highlight it. If you notice along the roof line up here, you can see it on the edges here on the corners. You know, it gives it just a little more worn look. Buy yourself a good $8, $10 flat brush. I use red sable, just white craft paint, 59-cent craft paint. Dump a little bit out, saturate the brush, make sure you have enough on the brush, and then start brushing it off on a paper towel or a piece of paper or whatever till you get it down to the point. And the way I know I'm to the right point, I brush it across my finger. If all I can see is my fingerprint, it's right. If it paints more than that or less than that, you have to change it. Just my own little trick for knowing when it's right. So at that point, that brush you can do the bulk of a building with, because you're putting it on such a small amount. Mm-hmm. So I start by doing the edges you want to highlight the most, and as the brush dries out, then I'll go down to things like streaking in that, where you just want it to be the slightest discoloration. So by the time you've gone over the building with the brush, now you're down to just enough where you might have to rub over it 4 or 5 times to even get it to show a little bit of white staining from water or steam, whatever the case might be. But I do that on almost all of my weathering, locomotives, rolling stock, structures. Here you can see I just went over the entire surface, so it highlighted some of the grain. This was unfinished. I buy these from Dr. Ben's. They're raw. They're the ends that didn't get planed on his wood, so they've got chips knocked out of them like this, and a lot of heavy grain in them. I love them. He sells them to me by the packs of 500 at a time. I use them for docks, all kinds of stuff. Here's another one with those boards in the front, and once again the paper tin from Stony Creek models that I just went over with a Dremel wheel to get that rusted out look. And here you can see some of this was sprinkled on, and then here where these spots are, you can see where it's heavier, the rust, where I've actually painted it with rust paint and then sprinkled the pigment on to make it stay heavier and look more textured. Finally, just some weathering on locomotives. Once again, you can see the white highlights, very light here and there, just enough to highlight the edges for wear up here on the headlight visor. Some heavier scaling here and there.
Al, how many hours does it take you on like a locomotive like that? And where do you begin? Where do you start on the one end and work the other? Do you start in the middle, or how does that work? How do you tackle that?
Well, like this one here took about 4 hours. I took the bunker off, buffed it with a wire wheel to get the lettering off, repainted it, decaled it, set the decaling, and while the decals were setting on that, on the back of it, I painted the woodwork gray. Left that dry, sealed the decals after 2 or 3 coats of Solvaset. Here's a trick for decals, always spray it with matte first. The film only shows about half as much. Then coat it with matte once it's dry. Before you go to the flat, give it about 2 coats, light coats of matte or semi-gloss. It makes the film just disappear. Where if you go straight to, I'm sure many of you have had this happen, you go straight to dull coat, you can see the square right around the decal. If you do the matte finish first, then dull coat it, it just makes it disappear. So decaled it, and this one is weathered using Hunter Line rust stains with pigments added. I dump a little bit of pigment out on a paper, gray, black, and rust in this case. While I'm putting it on, I'll dip in the stain and then just touch the brush to the pigment if I want to get areas like this where it makes it more rusty. And then if I want it real heavy, once again to get the scaling, I'll just actually sprinkle a little bit of, like back in here, I'll sprinkle a little bit of the pigment right onto the wet surface. Once everything dries, brush it off a little bit. You can go back, and if you want to put in like the gray highlight here is just pigment put on after the fact. And once I have everything the way I want it, I'll give it just the lightest coat of dull coat just to seal it so you don't get oil from your hands. And once it's sealed, I do the dry brushing, because if you do it before you hit the rust, your white paint on your brush will be orange in a hurry from the rust stain. Put the white on, and then the last thing was to go along and put grease, which is just black acrylic paint, put on, globbed on. Then I go along and hit it with Floqual High Gloss. And I know most of you don't have Floqual, but you can get it from Kevin. Then I take it, and as soon as I'm done doing that, I oil the gears, oil the moving parts, and stick it on. I have an automatic reversing track. And basically, I let it run back and forth until the paint dries. That way you don't end up with frozen up gears or shafts from the paint getting on them. Because if it's moving, and that acrylic paint dries in 15 minutes, and by moving everything that way, everything runs just like it's supposed to when it's dry. So, and one last, just another one. This one is lighter. It doesn't have the scaling on it. Just a little bit along the bottom of the cab in the bunker. Once again, the white highlights. Those were white decals. After you go over them with the rust, they turn yellow. If you want to keep them white, you just put a little bit heavier dull coat on them. Will keep them whiter the more you dull coat them. So and you know, old number 5 drug him out from behind the shops in a pinch. But there you can really see the scaling, the heavy rust. the grease on the moving parts. A little bit of bird poop running down over the side there from the window. Water scaling on top. So
It probably wouldn't pass any inspection.
and remember, this is before safety.
Right.
We needed some motive power. Will it fire up?
Will the boiler hold pressure?
You put one of those crews that you can just live without in this one, you know, just in case. So, okay, Dylan, that's my last picture. If you want to switch him back.
All right, you want me to kill the screen share?
Yep.
All righty.
Go ahead.
All right. Now, I want to ask this while it's on my mind. This may be the most important question I ask this evening, and I want to make sure we have it for posterity's sake. What can you tell us about the chain?
The chain.
I know you've told this story many a times.
For those of you who don't know, actually, hold on just 1 second here. Let me get the chain. For those of you who don't know, when I take pictures of my engines, they always have a huge piece of chain hanging on them, or usually they do. And everybody, you know, always kids me about the chain. But the real joke is, it's the same piece of chain on every engine. I just take it hanging on to take the picture, take it back off, lay it on the corner of the layout. Next one, I hang it around the headlight, or, you know, and everybody always kids me about the big heavy chain. It's sort of my trademark. The only thing, it's not actually on most of the locomotives. It's just a piece I hang on there for the pictures, because it always gets a bunch of comments about the chain. So there you go, Dylan. There's the secret behind the chain. This 3-inch piece is the chain. So
I had to ask. We needed it for posterity.
And you noticed I knew right where to go to get it too, because it was right where I took the last pictures, is where it was laying. So.
Hey Al, speaking of pictures, I wanted to ask you, how do you like your new phone?
Well, I do, but it is almost too much.
Yeah.
I've learned to. I just got one of the Galaxy S20 512 gig, 108 megapixel camera phones, and I tone it down as far as I can, and it's still the detail. It almost makes the pictures look 3D. There's so much detail in it. So what I've done, I mounted it on the tripod. I back it up across the room, and it's 100 power zoom. So I found that if you take it back 6 or 8 feet and zoom in 4, 5, 6 times, it takes spectacular photographs. That last picture I showed you, the detail on the engine, yeah, that was probably shot from 4 feet away. But the detail, if you get up close and take it, the detail, it literally looks like it's 3-dimensional. It's coming out at you. So you have to tone it down, and I found the best way for modeling photography to do it is just back the camera up. So
I got to head out, Al. It's been great. Enjoyed the pictures very well. I'll continue to follow your Facebook pages.
All right.
And, it was a great presentation. Thank you much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
So, like, you know, we've already covered the chain, and that's awesome, because that is the best running gag probably in On30 right now. Let's be honest. Anyone who's been in the On30 page, and when there's not a picture of the chain, it's almost like there's confusion.
Well, that's Newell's job. Newell points out every time the chain's not there. He comments, "Where's the chain?"
I remember somebody posted a picture once of a giant chain for like a link for like a battleship or something, and they're like, "Hey, this must be where Al gets his chain from."
I actually saved that picture. Yeah, the links are as tall as the guy standing in the picture. So. But you never know when you're going to have to move a tugboat, right?
Oh, let's be honest. A chain like that size, you're moving more than a tugboat.
I think I got you on that one on the big chain, Al.
Yes, yeah, yep,
Yeah. The Cunard liner anchor chain.
yep.
One thing is we have a lot of fun on this group, no matter what we do.
Well, that's something you know. You talked about this when you were featured here about the camaraderie of On30 modelers. There's just no nitpicking. Nobody says, that's not right. And that just takes the fun. You listen to that long enough, it takes the fun out of the hobby for you. We're here. The goofier it is, people are like, "Boy, I wish I'd have thought of that." So it's a good group of people.
Absolutely.
I think it's safe to say that us On30 guys embrace the crazy.
Crazy, the unique, the different. That I just got that Shea with the Porter boiler over top of the Shea boiler from Aaron Loyette.
That's insane.
It was when he told me he was building it. I said, "Yeah, that's just ridiculous." He brought it to the house and showed it to me, and I said, "You know what? That is so unique. I have to have it." What can we do here? So I ended up trading him a couple of other pieces for it. But it is such an oddball. I just had to put it in my collection. I have all of Alan Carroll's weirdos too. His 420 and the 210 440. So I'm a sucker for those oddballs.
But that's not a bad thing. I mean,
No.
You said it yourself. Nobody in On30 complains. They just go, "Why didn't I do that?"
I definitely have some unique equipment. So
Oh, absolutely, you do.
Al, can I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely.
Where do you get your pigments from?
I actually get them from I'd have to look up the name. It's a commercial paint company in New Jersey. If you just Google it, there's lots of places. The shipping on it's actually more than the pigments because they sell it like I probably haven't bought any for 5 years because they sell it like in the smallest quantity you can buy it is like a 2-pound bag. And I might use a baby food jar a year and I'm modeling 300 days out of the year. Somebody saw me weathering track one time and I just dumped rust pigment out in a pile, spray the track with Rust-Oleum ultra flat brown, lay it down and just sort of almost like a whisk broom and brush the pigment over top of it, bang it off and go to the next piece. And people are like, "Oh my God, that's $100 worth of powders." Well, it would be if they were powders, but in pigment, it's probably a nickel's worth. I mean, a mayonnaise jar, when I blended, a mayonnaise jar cost me about $2 or $3 to blend a mayonnaise jar full of. And I've been using it for so many years that I have a formula for like new rust, medium rust, old rust, gray dust, soot, just played with it till I got the color I wanted. And whenever I got the combination right, I just wrote it down. And that's, once again, it's kind of a personal preference on what you think the color should look like. But it's
How would you feel about sharing those formulas?
Sharing them? Well, the problem is there's about a half dozen companies out there that I'll put out of business if I put out how to do these. So I hate to do that. Maybe someday. But the companies that are making the little $7.95 squares of powders, they call them, I think it's the same stuff I'm using. I think they're just packaging it and putting 1,000% markup on it. But it would pretty much be the end of that industry if I shared this. So someday maybe I will.
So basically, for the record, for Al is basically Lex Luthor, and he's got the kryptonite for the weathering industry.
Weathering, I mean. Yeah, they wouldn't be selling too many of those $7.95 little squares if I published how to do this. So
you have 2 or 3 specific colors that you'd recommend people start with?
The three I use the most are rust, soot, which is, I use a dark rust, more brown than orange.
How do you buy it? I mean, what do you ask for when you order it?
Oh, it's just paint pigments. Just Google it. You can find it. What they sell it for, like when they paint a barn red, they don't buy 100-gallon red paint. They buy 5-gallon drums of clear base. They just dump a pound of the powder in it, or actually in a 5-gallon bucket, you only use like a pint of the pigment.
Yeah, but if I'm ordering pigment, what colors do I order?
Okay, all right. So brown and orange makes rust. Black makes soot. So brown, orange, black. Definitely get some white. Gray, of course, you make with black and white.
Black and white.
The soot, you just put just enough white in to make it that it's not like midnight black, just to gray it up just the slightest bit. Otherwise, it's as black can be. Let me see. I think the only one the 8 main colors. The only one I don't use is blue. I have a green, I have a yellow, I have a red. Use them very seldom. I mean, if you're painting a red building, you want to put some faded streaking on it with the red, but very seldom. So brown, orange, black, and white will give you 5 or 6 main colors just out of those 4.
Gotcha. That's it. And then I'm looking for pigments.
Pigments. It's just powdered paint pigment. Yep.
Powdered paint pigment.
Yep. And like I said, you got to be careful with it. It's potent. If you get that black on your fingers, they're black.
Yeah, you wear gloves, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sometimes. Usually only when I'm pouring it, because when you're trying to pour a powder, I don't know if you've ever tried to put talcum powder or anything. You know what happens? It's coming out nicely. Kapoom! Comes a great big chunk, and it's all over your hands. So, yeah, when I pour it, I try to use a funnel and gloves. So.
Hey, Al. Thank you very much. I got to head out too, but
all right, buddy. Good talking to you.
Good seeing you, and I'm really looking forward to September.
Okay, so are we.
All right. You be good, all you guys. Good night.
Good night, Al.
I need to check out too, Al. Thanks a lot for showing
Hey,
your stuff.
hold on, Kevin. Hold 1 second. Before any more people jump, just would like to ask everybody. I don't know if you saw it. Al and I are really doing a lot trying to drive activity within the hobby.
Found justice.
And do me a favor, if you would, please invite somebody to the next meeting. Don't come by yourself. We've really got to bring some more people in. This is a huge opportunity for us, you know, bringing in younger modeler, somebody new, and just have them hang out with us.
Yeah, I've done that already with a couple guys. So yeah, for sure. You're talking about the live meetings or the online meetings, Kevin?
I think this is a good place. I think there's a lot for people to learn and to mentor, and you know, because we cover a lot besides modeling here. There's a lot of leadership, you know, hobby directions. You know, we're going to have the dirty conversation about shows, because the whole show thing is slowly turning into a disaster. It's a dumpster fire. Everybody sees it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Our show is one of the bright spots. There are some bright spots, but not a lot. And we have to safeguard the hobby. And
I agree. And I think the Zoom meetings could be a real help. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm all for it. Before everybody leaves, though, before you leave, I got one question for you. When I got started in my model building, and I started to try to enter contest, one of the questions that was the hardest for me to answer is, how good is my model? When do I know that it's good enough that I'm not embarrassed if I take it to a show and enter it in a contest? And I struggled with that, and I still have the question, and I've asked Al this, I've asked everybody that I meet this question. How do you know? Yeah, that's good enough. Well, part of the answer I think Al gave me tonight, and I'm not sure that he even knew when he gave it to me. I think the answer is you photograph your model, you put the model away, you get up a clean new day, the next day or the next week, and you look at that photograph. And unless something clicks in your mind that says, I need to fix this part, or I need to fix that before I take it and show it to somebody, it's good enough. And I never thought about that before.
Yep.
So Al, or somebody, I'd like to do an article about that. What's good enough? How do you stop building that model? Whether it's an engine, whether it's weathering an engine, whether it's building a structure from scratch, whether it's designing a structure. How do you know to put the pencil away and take it to a show and stand there and be proud to say, I built that model? When is it good enough?
Yep.
Now, what I'd like to find is some modelers, more than one, to answer that question in my article. And if any of you guys, you've heard Al talk tonight, you've heard Alan talk, they have an artist view. I don't have that artist view, but I think if I took a picture and looked at that picture and said, yeah, that's my model, that I stopped building at that point. So I'm trying to get that out to people so that they have a way of at their home saying, I'm really proud of that. I'm going to take it and show it to people.
You know, I think that, Jim, there's good enough for what you want to do personally, and then there's good enough for contests, and they're different things, in my opinion. You know, you can.
Well, they're two different animals.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, like I pointed out, if you're building it for your layout, you can actually over detail it. You can make it that it's not usable anymore. But if you're building it, putting it in a glass case and taking it to a show, and that's all you're ever going to do with it, no one's actually going to touch it or run it or anything else, yeah, you can go crazy on it. So,
yeah, I agree.
Les Davis gave me some good advice this week when I was going over the top on some stone walls I couldn't get right. He said, where's it going to be on your layout? And I said, about 1.5 feet back. He goes, it's good enough.
That's right. That's right.
But you're doing different things. Like with a layout, you're modeling in bulk, and you're modeling a whole massive scene rather than one individual focused diorama. So
Right.
You can get by with a lot of things and suggest things that are there that actually aren't there on a layout. But, you know, if your energy's focused on a small area, as with a diorama, you're looking at it from a totally different.
When you're doing contests, you know, I've done NMRA contest judging, and you know what I learned from the guys that I learned to judge from is the level of scrutiny you give a contest model is off the charts. You know, it's, you know, here's the handrail brackets, but there's no nut bolt washer castings holding them on, or you're missing, you know, the air coupling, or just, you know, there's little things that when you're trying for a contest grade model that really are things to think about when you're doing a layout. You know, I think you're right, Tom, that you know, it's the overall effect that you're looking for, not that high degree of scrutiny that contest models are given. And that's where photography, I think, like Jim said, photography helps, and Al does that. You can see that in Al's pictures, you know, where that rust that's textured makes a difference on a model, on a contest model.
And the other thing with photographs today, I mean, we get great photos out of our phones, and electrons are really cheap. You can rattle off a whole bunch, and you know, it's not like it used to be in the 80s. You know, when
I post a photo every day just to keep activity on the pages I run. Photo of the day.
Yep.
Everybody's like, "Wow, I can't believe you know, take that picture every day." I'm like, I don't take those every day. You know, I shoot 100 and pull out the best 3 and stick them in a file to use for that. The next day, I shoot 100 more of something else or something different or something I built. And same thing. If you can pull 3 or 4 that are high enough quality to post out of 100, you're doing good, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
that's a true photographer.
I have tens of thousands of photographs, you know? But,
okay, guys. Now guys, what you're talking about is what I'm trying to convey in an article. So I can't just have one of you talk about this. What I need is all of you to give a perspective on it. Because what's good enough for one thing is way over the top.
2 different animals.
Yep. You know, and it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Well, if the photograph gives you that, and you can stand back and say, that's what I want to accomplish, it's good enough. Good enough for what you're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Now, how I can structure that in an article and how I can get people to talk about the different perspectives as you all are doing tonight. Because I haven't read anything about this in the model press. Nobody wants to talk about this. It's either you enter an NMRA contest or you're just a junkie over here playing with trends. And there's a wide spectrum between those two that a lot of people would love to be in.
Well,
guys, I need to bail. I'm sorry. I continue the conversation, but my wife is calling me to dinner and she's getting pissed. So.
Understood.
Thank you.
Well,
take care, guys.
I have to leave as well, and since Kevin's leaving, I have to leave. Al, thank you very much. It was most informative. I enjoyed this evening.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Take care.
Hey, Al, get rid of the COVID so I can get back up there and visit, okay?
Oh my God. Oh my God, I know. I need your help with some of that, with that DCC programming stuff.
Yeah.
Right,
I miss my every couple of week visits on my business trips.
I can't make that 2442 work for the life of me.
Al,
thank you, Al. I think
there's
there's about 3
and learned quite a lot. Thank you.
Good. We'll do it again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, listen, next Saturday, we got the 2 mics coming back. They're going to talk about the next phase of the critter development, and Mike's going to talk to us about the tool company LMM. And we're going to try for the first time to do some show and tell. So if you great model builders have ever built a model and you've taken a picture of it and you think it's good enough to show us, we'd love to see it and have you talk to us about how you built it. So that'll be something different for us, and we hope you all can show up and participate.